ping pong table in a lobby is not culture. It is a ping pong table in the lobby. The other thing about culture is that in many times it's a mix between created and emergent. That is, what you have some organizations who are saying, okay, we're going to create a playful culture, and therefore we're going to give you a ping pong table, and we're going to have mandatory ping pong tournaments. That's kind of this forced way of doing things. I think one of the things that I've seen in organizations is that certain kinds of culture is emergent, that people begin establishing certain kinds of rituals and things because they're an expression of who they are, how they connect to others, and good organizations simply get out in front of that parade.
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast with Stephen Leese and Sean Tinney. This podcast is a behind-the-shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses. You can live with the status quo, you can challenge the status quo, or you can do what we do at Goodr and status the quo challenge.
Welcome. We have a very special guest with us today, New York Times bestselling author Daniel Pink. Dan, thanks for being here.
A pleasure to be with you.
I've actually been a longtime admirer of Daniel's work, and so much so that we've actually modeled our quarterly performance review and pay system after the work in your book, Drive. We call it AMP. And before I get into Drive, a bunch of other work that you've done, I would actually love to know an interesting story about yourself that led you to the person you are today.
I don't, that's an interesting question. Because at some level, everything led me to the person I am today, but in some sense, nothing led me to the person I am today because there's a set of random events. But I'll instead of being an ass and poking at your question, I'll answer it.
Do it.
I think that, one of the, if you're talking about formative experiences, I think that, and it goes something to randomness and just circumstance of your life. I grew up in Central Ohio. And Central Ohio in general, and Central Ohio in particular, have an incredible public library system. Even better when I was a kid. And I grew up being able to walk to a very, very good public library and being able to take a bus to a ginormous downtown big library. And that, I think, shaped my childhood more than anything that I could imagine. If I had not grown up around libraries, I don't know, maybe I would have been a dentist. Not that there's anything, or a truck driver, or the founder of a sunglasses company or something like that.
Maybe. Were you a prolific reader growing up then?
I was a pretty steady reader. Yeah. I wasn't. I wish I had actually, in retrospect, I wish I had read more. I actually, as a kid, watched more TV than I should have watched, and I realized that the opportunity costs of that were, higher than I realized when I was 8 years old and watching Happy Days. But I did read, and I was around books and writing just as part of my life.
Got it. And it's
also part of the time when parents would let a 9-year-old kid walk 15 minutes by himself and hang out in a library by himself for 4 hours. Now parents would have to arrange it for them and make it a play date and strap on some monitoring device. So it was a different era of parenting.
Well, I hear you. I actually think one of the things that led me to the person I am today is that my parents were, latchkey would be, maybe a conservative viewpoint where I was able to do whatever, and I got into a lot of trouble, and I got myself out of a lot of trouble. And I think that actually is really a really great experience for me personally.
Yeah.
So I'm a big routine person. I got to imagine between writing, speaking, interviews, consulting, side projects, you have a full life. I would actually love to know, what does your day-to-day look like?
It depends. It depends on, when the days when I have to travel to do stuff, it's totally up for grabs. But on a good day, which is when I'm not traveling and I'm writing or trying to create something, it's pretty boring. Let me tell you about what a writing day is like.
Let's hear it.
I will come into my office where I'm talking to you right now. This is the garage behind my house. I live right over there. Literally, 20-something steps over there. I will come into my office, not insanely early. I'm not one of those people who starts working at 6:30, but I'm also not one of those people who rolls in at 10, maybe 8:30 or so. And on writing days, what I'll do is I'll come into this office and I will give myself a number, a quota, a number of words that I have to hit. It will vary from time to time. So sometimes it's only 500, sometimes it's 800. If I have a lot of coffee, maybe 1,000, but usually not. And I don't bring my phone with me into the office, and I don't open up my email. And the only thing I do is hit my word count. And sometimes I can hit it by 10:15, 10:30. Other times it's not till 11:30. Other times it's noon and I'm starving and I want to have some lunch, but I haven't hit my word count. And on really shitty days, it's like 3. So, but the point is that the most I hit my number and then I'm allowed to do other things, and I'm not allowed to do anything before I hit my number. And my hard-won experience, having done this for 20 years, is that that's how you do it. You show up and do your work, and you show up the next day and do your work, and you show up the next day and do your work, and show up the next day and do your work. It's not glamorous, but it's your job, and you show up and do it.
I think that this is a commonality I've heard from a lot of people, especially who have done something for a long time. Their day-to-day is incredibly unsexy. And I think to produce at a high level, it has to be.
Yeah, I mean, because I think it's a lot of this is true for. I think there's a kind of a mythology about even modestly creative work, that the way it happens is through these bolts of lightning that occur to you, these epiphanies you have while running around picking daisies or sitting in your office in a smoking jacket. And that's nonsense. If I waited around until I was inspired to write, I'd never have written a thing. What I do is I do what artists do, which is that I show up, I do my work, and I do everything I possibly can to, as Seth Godin would say, to ship. So show up, do your work, make it great, and ship it. And that's what it is. And again, there's no glamour in that, but there is a lot of satisfaction because you're creating something the world didn't know it was missing. You're creating something that, but for your existence on the planet, might not exist itself. And you are, we hope, whether it's sunglasses or whether it's books, making people's lives a little bit better, bringing them a little bit of enlightenment or joy or anything else to improve how they live their daily lives.
We were talking off camera here about getting things done. GTD by David Allen. Can you talk about your practice? Do you do a weekly review? When is it? I'm a huge GTDer myself.
Okay. This is I got a whole kettle of fish here, man. I could talk about GTD till the cows come home. So first of all, just to show my bona fides, let me show on the video. This is my labeler. Okay, so you know that I'm hardcore. All right.
Yep.
And then you can see various folders here for projects and things like that. So here you go. So here are folders with labels on them right here. So on the weekly review, I have a document called a weekly review. I review it more than week. I don't do that weekly. I do that based on my own kind of rhythm of how things are going. And I often go back to it when after like 2 or 3 or 4 days in a row, I'm feeling like I'm adrift. Like, okay, what am I doing here again? And I use that to basically come back and figure out, okay, what are the things that I need to do? So I probably do my weekly review, 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, it's a critical practice for myself. I think that having that anchor and I constantly am adding to it has really improved my work. All right, so changing topics.
On the meta point, I'm sorry, on the meta point about GTD, it's basically, I mean, I think what's life changing about it is that, and I tell my kids this, and I tell other people I work with this. It's like, get stuff out of your head into a system, right? Your head is for having ideas. It's not, your brain is for having ideas. It's not for housing ideas. All right, get it out of your or things you have to do. Get it out of your head and into a system, and that frees you up to do other kinds of. It frees you up to do other kinds of work. What's more, the other thing that I think is revelatory about this system, and I'm not like a hardcore orthodox GTDer. I'm like sort of probably middle of the road. But the concept in getting things done of the next action, where you're not thinking about, okay, what are the 46 things I have to do to complete this project? You just think, okay, what's the next thing that I have to do? What's the next thing that I have to do? And those kinds of small incremental steps are powerful. That is how you, to use their language, get things done.
Yeah, I think there's 4 things for me that for GTD. It's the weekly review that anchors like I need that. The idea of what you said, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. So capturing everything, labeling it as the next action, and then just the simple 2-minute rule. If something's quick, do it. Like if I live it into those things constantly, I'm having a great day.
If those are the ways that you practice this religion, you are going to heaven. No question. I agree with you 100% on the 2-minute rule too. That is, I probably invoke the 2-minute rule once a day.
Yeah,
because again, and the 2-minute rule for the great unwashed out there who haven't seen the light on this system is that if you have a task and it can be done in less than 2 minutes, do it now. Don't put it on the list. Don't keep it in your head. Just do it. Just do it now.
It will profoundly change your life if you can just live by that one rule.
I agree with you 100% on that.
All right. So this is the Culture Gooder podcast, and we're focused on all things work and company culture. So what does the word culture mean to you?
It means sort of a mix of, I don't know, I sort of look at it as like a Venn diagram of with an overlap of sort of one circle of who we are, and the other one of, how do we do things around here? And so it's a combination of kind of values, but those values then are enacted in behavior. Yeah.
I always think of it as like the complete, right? It is the behaviors, the practices, the rituals that we have, and it's not just a ping pong table in the lobby.
No, a ping pong table in a lobby is not culture. It is a ping pong table in the lobby. and right. And I also the other thing about it is that it's a fascinating topic. The other thing about culture is that in many times it's a mix between created and emergent. That is, what you have some organizations who are saying, okay, we're going to create a playful culture, and therefore we're going to give you a ping pong table, and we're going to have mandatory ping pong tournaments. That's kind of this forced way of doing things. I think one of the things that I've seen in organizations is that certain kinds of culture is emergent, that people begin establishing certain kinds of rituals and things because they're an expression of who they are, how they connect to others, and good organizations simply get out in front of that parade. And there's some evidence of this. I think it's Greg Walton at Stanford has done this, showing that when you think about fun activities on the job, fun activities on the job that are required by your boss are not fun for people. Fun activities on the job that people come up with themselves and do organically are extraordinarily meaningful and add a lot to a cohesive culture.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, I'd never heard this concept of like emergent, but I love it.
Well, if you look around, let me give you an example of that, Stephen. So I did this project just years ago for a trade association. I'm just curious. And what I did is I had this idea of a kind of a, not to overstate it, but a methodology. And what I did is I had people spend a week in this organization and take a total of 20 photos. 20 photos, 10 photos of what's the best part about working here, 20 photos of what's the worst part about working here. All right. And so it wasn't a huge organization. This particular office had maybe like 20 people. So I ended up with, a few hundred photographs. And then I sat down with each person to try to have them explain to me why they picked a particular photograph. And one of the things that was peculiar about this is that I got an extraordinary, as I was looking at these photos that were submitted, I got an stunningly large number of photographs of pies.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying, what is up with these pies? And what had happened is that there was this one guy in the office who on Fridays, every Friday, would bring a pie that he made himself on Thursday night. And he would bring it into the office in the break room. And people would, come and have a piece of pie and grab a piece of pie. And what was happening is that everybody found it pretty meaningful. Like not just like good pie, but kind of meaningful. It's like, oh, this is a sign of caring. This is a way that I bond with my colleagues. But all of them thought that they were the only ones who thought that. And so, including the guy who was making the pie. And so this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about emergent. Nobody told this guy, bake a pie on Thursday night and bring it in. It's a team building exercise. Instead, he just did it. It emerged from the bottom up, and it ended up being this, like extraordinarily important thing for culture, for a sense of belonging. And so, if you see that happen in your organization, what you want to do is not screw it up, not say, because you can see an organization screwing that up. You can see an organization saying, oh my God, you could bring in pies on Friday. You know what? I want someone to bring empanadas on Tuesday. And suddenly it becomes this directive, controlled kind of thing rather than something that is emergent.
Is there a way to foster that in a healthy way that isn't the empanadas on Tuesday?
I think what you do is, I think that part of it is negative action. I think that if you're the boss of that organization, and the boss of this organization she wasn't even that aware that this was going on, let alone that it was that meaningful, because she traveled a lot. But once she knew that, she started coming to these things, celebrate, and basically sort of blessing it, but also like not getting in the way of it. Letting the people who are in the culture actually define the culture and not try to control it. Just at some level, just get out of the way. But also give it a kind of a blessing so that people don't feel skittish about doing it. And I also think it's important for leaders of these organizations just to keep their eyes and ears open for these kinds of things that are going on. There are a lot of these informal rituals that emerge inside of organizations that end up being important to people, and they end up being a integral part, I think, of culture and a sense of satisfaction at work, even though there isn't somebody in charge who's putting everybody on a bus to go to Six Flags.
Yeah, cool. All right, so your book, Win, which is The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing, you talk about how we all fit in three categories: either early birds, it's about 15%, larks, 65% of us, and then night owls, 20%. I'm actually curious, 1/5 of the population performs at night, the night owls, but our entire culture, and goodr's the same, is made for an early bird or a lark. How can we help night owls?
That's it's a great point. I mean, what you're talking about is something that I wrote about. I mean, it's fairly well known about what are known as chronotypes, which is just your propensity. And exactly as you say, you got 15% of us are naturally wake up early and go to sleep early. About 2/3 of us are kind of in the middle, and about 20% of us naturally wake up late and go to sleep late. I think that this underscores a case for autonomy. That if you have these folks who are night owls who do their better work late at night, let them do that. Don't force someone with an evening chronotype, a particularly hardcore night owl. Don't force that person to come to an 8 a.m. staff meeting. Don't make that person go to an 8:30 a.m. meeting about your travel voucher policy. That's a perfect way to drive them out. Let them fashion the schedule that is right for them. and make certain kinds of accommodation. What we're doing, we have it backwards essentially, like sort of looking at it through the wrong end of the scope. What we want to do is we basically require those night owls to change their behavior to help the organization. But what we should be doing is actually changing the organizational rules to help those night owls. Because here's the dirty little secret: 1/5 of the population are night owls. Night owls. Okay, here's the thing: are you a night owl or are you a morning person? Or
I think I'm a lark on the earlier side.
Yeah, that's pretty common. So you're in the middle, but that's what a lot of people are. There aren't that many people, as you know, who are like hardcore larks. Like they get up insanely early and they go to sleep insanely early. But there are a lot of people like you and me who are early-ish. I think that what we should be doing here is letting those night owls work when they want and not force them into structures that are good for you and me. But as I said, the dirty little secret is that night owls are, more likely to have problems with addiction, more likely to have gone to jail. But night owls also test higher on both intelligence tests and creativity tests. And so some of the most talented people are in this population that you're systematically disadvantaging. That seems like a bad idea from an organization development perspective.
Yeah.
You're systematically putting some of your most capable people in situations where they cannot do their best work.
All right. Well, I feel like this is one we'll need to revisit here, goodr, how to work on. I'm curious, is there a way to test people for this? Is it
Sure. Yeah, there are various instruments available online. There's the Munich chronotype questionnaire, the MCTQ. There's the morning eveningness questionnaire. There's also a very simple, like back of the envelope way of doing it, where you ask people. We can do it right now if you want.
Let's do it.
So chronobiologists. So here's a way to figure it out. Chronobiologists have this concept of a free day. A free day is a day when you can do whatever you want. You don't have to wake up to go to work. You don't have to be anywhere at a certain amount of time. You can go to sleep when you want. You can wake up when you want. You're not trying to catch up on sleep. It's just a day where you can listen to your body. And so the key here is to figure out, the easy way to figure out your chronotype is to figure out your midpoint of sleep on that free day. So for me, for instance, I would typically, on a free day, go to sleep at about midnight and I would wake up at about 8. Okay, so if I just listen to myself, I would just go to sleep at midnight and wake up at 8.
Mm-hmm.
So my midpoint of sleep is 4 a.m. Okay, now here's what we know. If your midpoint of sleep is 3:30 or earlier, you're probably a lark. If your midpoint of sleep is 5:30 or later, you're probably an owl. And if your midpoint of sleep is in between there, you're probably in the middle. But again, there are many people like me who are technically in the middle, but lean toward that earliness. And so it's just a way to do that. But if you have people who are, 20% of the population who just feel not like themselves at 8:30 in the morning, who actually feel like they're rocking and rolling at 10 o'clock at night, I think you have to get out of their way, liberate them to do the best work that they can at the time that's best for them.
I'd love to hear your opinion on this. One thing that we've done here, Dan, is we don't allow meetings Monday until afternoon.
Okay.
So there's no meetings Monday mornings, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Tuesday, Thursdays are meeting days, and Monday afternoons. And kind of the idea there was we want to make sure people aren't sitting in meetings all day. We want to create space for autonomy, but we also need to get people on some sort of succinct time to meet. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this strategy.
I love it. I think, well, first of all, I think that the most important thing I hear in what you're doing there is that you're trying stuff, you're experimenting, and listening to the results. Okay, that's the most important thing. I really believe more and more today that people who are running companies, people like you, need to essentially operate like scientists. What do scientists do? Scientists have a hypothesis and they go out and test the hypothesis, and that's essentially what you're doing there. So to me, on that broad level, that's the way to do it. Now, in terms of what you found, and it seems like it's working out for you, it makes perfect sense to me. There are times when you want everyone together in real time together. There's no question about that. There are other times when you want people to do heads down solo work. And I think one of the things that's happening in this world where more of us are working remotely is that organizations are trying to tease out those questions. We think about something like collaboration. We do not have a good theory of what kind of work should be done solo and what kind of work should be done together. We really don't. We've been making it up since there was white collar work. And I think that the pandemic and the move toward hybrid has been a kind of a forcing function to say, okay, what kind of work should be done solo? What kind of work should be done together? And the same thing is true with synchronous work. What kind of work do we need everybody to be together in real time? What kind of work do we need people to do it asynchronously? And there's some work better done asynchronously, some work better done synchronously. But in my view, we are slightly over-indexed on collaboration and synchronous work just because that's sort of what we started doing. And as a consequence, I think we're draining some of the benefit of collaborative work and synchronous work because we're doing it a little too much. And so what you're suggesting are just some boundaries around those two types of work. And that seems perfectly sensible to me. I mean, what you're essentially pioneering a kind of it's just another form of hybrid, which is I think where the world is going post pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of like hypothesis because I think we try and do a good job of like being a bit of a mad scientist of like, what if we try this? Oh, that didn't work. That didn't work. Let's reverse that back.
Yeah, but I think that's how you have to do it. I mean, it's like I talk to so many business leaders and they want some certainty. What they want is they want to know I'm going to do this and I want to know that it's going to work. And then I'll invest so I can invest a huge amount of money in doing it. And the answer is I don't know whether it's going to work. Test it out on a small scale. And if it works on a small scale, test it out on a larger scale. And if it works on a larger scale, test it out on an even other larger scale. I mean, this ability to have hypothesis, to test the hypothesis, to learn from those experiments, to iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. That's how I think that's how you have to do it. And it's uncomfortable for people, particularly people who came up in very traditional kind of business environments or even MBA programs where everything was about strategic planning. There's a lot to be said for strategy, but there's at some level I think they were over-indexed on planning and under-indexed on experimentation.
All right, I agree. So on that note, another kind of hypothesis or test we've been doing for about the past 5 years is based on a lot of the work you did in Drive. So we started goodr in 2015, and I started other companies before. Never, they all failed. I'd worked for corporate America. And we found this 2 years in, so 2017, we had 8 people working here, and we realized like, oh man, we need to do things like have performance reviews and how do we calculate raises? And leaning back on the experience of I rarely had performance reviews. I never knew how a raise was calculated. And so we took a step back and we're like, let's just design our own from the ground up. And I had read your book Drive. And so we created our quarterly performance review system that we call AMP. And so it's, autonomy, mastery, purpose is the anchors of it. So I'm trying to think of the right entry point, but what stuck out to me, and I'd love for you, I can go down of what we ended up doing here, but this idea of intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic. I mean, first, could you kind of explain that to our people, and then the importance of autonomy, mastery, and purpose? And then I can kind of tell you the experiment that we've been running for 5 years, and we have changed it basically every quarter for the past 5 years.
Okay, so I'm going to oversimplify a bit in the name of speed and conciseness, but the gist of it is this. So intrinsic motivation are motivations that come from within. You're doing something because you want to do it, because it's meaningful to you, because it's part of who you are, because you enjoy doing it. Extrinsic motivations are when you're doing it in response to something outside, whether it's applause or praise or money or anything, those kinds of things. Now, obviously, human beings are a mix of both intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. But in organizations, there's a particular kind of extrinsic motivator that is perilous. And it's what I call an if-then reward. As in, if you do this, then you get that. If you do this, then you get that. 60 years of science tells us that if-then rewards, not all rewards, okay, not like a healthy paycheck, But if then rewards. If you do this, then you get that. If you do this, I'll give you a bonus. If you do this, I'll give you a bonus. If you do this, I'll give you a bonus. If then rewards are great for simple tasks with short time horizons, but not so great for complex tasks with long horizons. And the reason is that human beings love rewards. So you dangle a reward in front of someone, they approach the problem very narrowly. They approach it narrow in scope and shallow in horizon. And that's good for some things. You want somebody to stuff envelopes? Pay them per envelope and give them a bonus for every 100 envelopes stuffed. You will get more envelope stuffed. There's no question about that. However, if you want people to say, "Hey, what's a cool new style of sunglasses that we could have? What's a wacky name we can give to this pair of sunglasses?" Let's come up with another line. What's another line of business that would just shock the world? With those kinds of things, you want people looking expansively. And the way that people look expansively is if they, getting to the point, if they are paid well and paid fairly, and they have a sense of autonomy, they have some control over what they do, who they do it with, when they do it, especially for those night owls, how, to some extent, how they do it, depending on the job. A sense of mastery, that is, are they getting better at something that matters? Are they making progress in meaningful work? And finally, a sense of purpose. Do they know it? Can they see that their everyday actions are making a difference or making a contribution? And it turns out that that troika that you have in your company, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, if you pay people well, take the issue of money off the table, and offer autonomy, mastery, and purpose, that seems to be a more effective and certainly much more sustainable motivational regime than this endless barrage of if-then rewards and carrots and sticks.
Yeah. So how we set ours up, and I'd love for you to poke holes in it, is basically based on what the book is. We took a step back and was like, all right, this is where pre-pandemic we were a Tuesday, Thursday company. So we were like, all right, well, autonomy is clearly really important. I know that. It's always been important to me. So you don't have to be in the office Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So try to create more autonomy. And then when we were developing the system, belief that once a year reviews is too far apart. So we moved it to quarterly, and we said, hey, let's evaluate people on 3 things. Their autonomy. So that's the bulk of their work, 80%. Have everybody have a mastery project once a quarter, and it could be a year long, which is, getting better at a skill like public speaking or something that's really important to them. And then purpose. So 10% time to work for a nonprofit. It can be volunteering. And every quarter people have goals, we review it, and their score actually adds up to what their raise ends up being. And so that's kind of it. I mean, in an extremely abridged version, I would just love to know your initial thoughts on this and some holes to poke.
Well, the main thing, okay, so let me go back to first principles here, which is that I don't have a sort of an orthodoxy of how things should be. I think that the science gives us a set of guiding principles, and it's up to smart people like you to test those principles out in the wild. So if you have something that's effective, don't mess with it. That's my top view. If you said to me, you know what, Dan, in the sunglasses business, incredibly controlling, high stakes contingent rewards lead to better performance, I'd say go with that. You're the exception to all of this. Now, so that's one thing. The second thing is that you have to think about what are these performance reviews for. And here there's some tension, if not antagonism, between two competing objectives. One of them is essentially evaluative. We need to see who's doing a good job in case we need to, or a bad job, in case we need to get rid of them, and also so that we can compensate them fairly. That's an evaluation. That's an evaluative part. The other thing, though, about performance reviews is, are you helping people get better at something? Are they actually learning and growing and improving? And sometimes those things are difficult to do in the same session, the same conversation, the same kind of institution. And so you might be running into some problems in that, and inevitably, if there's a raise involved, that crowds out everything else. Mm-hmm. And so tell me how much give me a sense in percentage terms. How much is at stake in those raises? Like how much of their overall comp might that raise be?
So
I guess it's a raise, not a bonus. It's a bump in salary for the following year.
It's a raise. Yeah. Yeah. So for example, the average raise based on AMP is about 7%. And so
7, yeah.
That's the average.
Okay, so I think that's and do people self-evaluate on these?
So we do it. Yeah, they come in with a self-evaluation, then a committee evaluation. So it's a twofer.
Yeah. I think that here's the thing: when there's a raise at stake, it basically becomes all about evaluation and not about improvement. Because if a raise is at stake, I'm going to give myself pretty high marks because I think I'm awesome and I want a 7% raise. And so there might be a way to separate those things out so that you can have, maybe something in terms of improvement, maybe something like weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones, 10-minute one-on-ones that are essentially coaching, feedback, advice, and improvement. And then just not make any bones that the quarterly reviews are about evaluation, because the big problem is that they're two very, very different things, and people are going to be sort of less forthright if there is money on the line. But again, if it works for you, God bless, keep doing it. But what I would suggest is maybe. Another possible experiment. Switch those things to twice a year, and move toward if you can. Remind me, what do you have? 100 and how many people?
130 now.
Yeah, if you can, move those to twice a year and add a kind of a purely kind of coaching, improvement-led bi-weekly check-in. So the questions are, so it's like, so how's it going? What are you working on?
Yeah.
What do you need? And so people can get the feedback on how they're doing and how they can get better immediately.
The one thing that we did do in that vein is all the team leaders, they do a one-on-one with everybody once a month.
Good.
In kind of this space. We are actually going to move to trimesterly this year because we realize that we've got it. But the other thing that we've learned is we value self-awareness. And what I mean by that is, man, it's okay if somebody comes in and is like, yeah, I struggled this quarter for these reasons. If the team lead, and we want to incentivize team leaders to be having real-time feedback as much as possible. And so if the team leader and the person are unified in their evaluation, we actually would call a self-awareness bonus. So we actually put a bonus on top relevant of the scores because we just value people being on the same page and transparent. Yeah.
If
you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, no, again, I just want stuff that works, okay? And so I admire your willingness to shake things up, to try different things. And if it works, I'm loath to say that anybody should get rid of it. The one concern I might have is just to think about, or there's a way to tally how much time and treasure are you spending administering this? Like how much of the whole leadership team's time and mental energy is going to kind of maintaining and administering this system. And there are going to be opportunity costs of that. It's opportunity costs that they're not spending, going out and hiring great people, or going out and coming up with a new product line, or going out and expanding your market to, intergalactic domination. So is this something else to think about there? My general view is that I don't think the evidence says that we should not have variable pay. I don't think the evidence says that. I think what it does say is that if we're going to have variable pay, first of all, I'm a big believer in high base. First of all, I'll give it even a first of all before my first of all. First of all, hire great people. Okay?
Yes.
Hire great people. That is the best compensation system that you can have. The first step in any great compensation system. Hire great people. We have this foolish notion that we can hire anybody and plug them into our elaborate compensation system and they're magically going to be motivated. That is complete nonsense. Hire great people. I'm a big believer in paying people high base salaries. There's some good evidence in economics for doing that. Pay people high base salaries. Why? Because human beings are exquisitely attuned to the norm of fairness. The reason people leave jobs, or one reason people leave jobs, is they look around and say, wait a second, someone inside who's doing my job is getting paid more than me? This place sucks. Or, hey, there's another company just like ours and they're paying people 15% more than I'm getting here. This is totally not fair. You want people to look around and say, oh, okay, I'm being treated fairly. Okay, so they stop thinking about the money. Then once you do that, I think it's possible to have some amount of variable pay tied to metrics that matter, that are simple metrics simple metrics that matter to the business and are utterly transparent. Everybody knows those things. So it seems like with you, you've got that part of it, is that the metrics are fairly simple. They're very transparent. Everybody knows what they are, and they seem to be tied to business outcomes that you want.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, when I say high base salaries, just to be clear here, I don't mean paying everybody the same. I don't think that's because the thing is like if Eduardo is better than Jane, then Eduardo should get more money than Jane. That's fair. All right. So treating everybody fairly doesn't mean treating everybody the same. It means treating everybody fairly. But again, that general set of design principles: high base salaries, variable pay that isn't massive and off the charts, tied to metrics that matter, that are simple for everyone to understand and are utterly transparent. That's cool. And it seems like you're on that track.
Yeah, we are. And we've gone through, many iterations. One thing that's interesting is, we have 10% time, so for the purpose part. And what's crazy, some people fall in love with it. They start nonprofits, they go down this rabbit hole. But I would say maybe 25% of the top performers actually really struggle in this like purpose project, doing things.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it could be a bunch of things. I mean, I think that for purpose doesn't necessarily have to express itself in a side project. It could simply be that people are finding purpose in the job itself. And for many people, that's enough. The other thing about it is that one of the things that's happened since I wrote that book is that there's been a little bit of a move away from these, like, you're doing 10% time. Google started out with 20% time. There's been a move away from that to something much smaller, which would be something like, one idea I love, a genius hour. So 1 hour a week. You can leave, do whatever you want, come up with cool ideas. Things like, Friday evening experiments, which is an idea from these Nobel Prize winning physicists who carve out 2 or 3 hours every week just to work on stuff that's not part of their regular job. So it's not 20% time, it's just a couple hours a week. I think that those might be small baby steps for the people who don't like doing these side projects. And again, remember, don't forget about the autonomy part of that. You want these things to be freely chosen. And so someone saying, "Oh crap, I got to start a nonprofit," or I got to, that's not gonna do you or them a lot of good.
No, that's good insight. So I loved your most recent book, Power of Regret, and I for sure have regret in my life, but I would actually love, and I think regret is a good thing, but I wouldn't change anything about my life because I love where I am. How do I rectify having regret but not ever wanting to change anything?
Great point. It's a great question. It's a hugely important question, and I think that those two impulses are compatible. So what's something that you regret that might have led you to where you are today?
Oh, something that let's see. I mean, I for sure regret, I barely graduated high school, and I for sure regret that I didn't have good enough grades to go to a big state university and live in the dorms with a football team. That's the experience I'll never have in my life. Okay,
fantastic. Okay, so and yet the path that you took you in this really innovative path. Okay, absolutely. Okay, this is a great one. Okay, so for starters, number one, one can be perfectly satisfied and happy with how their life turned out and still have regret. The regret that you have about school is a regret really about conscientiousness, but to some extent about taking life seriously. And you can say, okay, there's a point in my life when I wasn't conscientious, when I wasn't maybe respectful to other people, and you know what? I regret that. Now, my life right now is fine, but I can take that regret and say, what lesson did I learn from that? The fact that this bothers you suggests to me that you value conscientiousness more than you might realize. And it's instructing you to be conscientious in other parts of your life. And so you can say, oh, I'm totally psyched where my life is right now, but I have regrets. And instead of ignoring them or wallowing in them, I'm going to say, wait a second, that decision or indecision from years ago that still bugs me is a knock at the door. It's teaching me something. It's telling me what I value, and it's instructing me on how to do differently. So those things are perfectly compatible. I have a lot of regrets, and I'm perfectly happy with my life. And I'll give you an example from my own life. I was almost the opposite of you in education, that I was like too dutiful. Okay, and so I went to law school. If I had it to do over again, I would not have gone to law school. I think it was largely not a good use of my time, and I probably should have done something else. Not cataclysmic, but it was like, again, I keep coming back to opportunity costs, some pretty significant opportunity costs. It took me until I was 36 years old to pay off all of my loans. Okay, but here's the thing: I met my wife in law school. All right, and so if you have an angel or a devil who descends into my office here in Washington, D.C. and say, I'm going to make you a deal. You can live your life over again. You can live your life over again, and not go to law school. But as a consequence of that, you'll never meet Jessica. I'm going to say, no, I don't want that deal. I don't want that deal. I want the bad decision that led me to where I am today. Now, that said, I can look back on that bad decision and say, what lesson did I learn from that? And the lesson that I learned from that, there are a lot of lessons I learned from that. Lesson that I learned from that is care way less about what other people think, investigate paths before actually pursuing them and thinking you know what they are, what they are like, and so be less dutiful and more true to who you are. Okay, and so I can learn lessons from those and still be satisfied with my life. Because the fact that even in this conversation, that decision bugs me is telling me something. It's telling me that I value a greater degree of kind of it's telling me that conformity makes me a little bit crazy, and therefore I value originality, let's say, and it's instructing me to be original in the rest of my life.
Oh man!
Even though if the bargain that the devil made was that I could never meet, that I still had that I could relive that, but not meet my wife, I'm not taking that deal.
No, that's a nice.
It's a great question. It's a really, really, really important question about our lives. I mean, it's fundamental. And the thing is, it's like on the surface, it seems like those two things are not compatible, but they are. You just have to kind of disentangle them a little bit.
I heard you talk on the Stephen Bartlett on his podcast, Diary of a CEO, about you regretting not starting a business with a large team. Did I get that right? Like that's one thing. I would love to know, like if I had a magic wand and I could do this, like what would you base your culture off of inside this regret?
Okay, well, so that was less of a well, it was a little bit of a regret. So basically, I think I will answer your question, but let me give a lengthy prelude to it. I think there's a bigger lesson there. If I don't remember Stephen's exact question, but I think there's a bigger lesson there, is that I always thought that what I should be doing in order to be quote unquote successful or accomplish or whatever is that I should, build an organization and have a team and da 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 da. And the truth of the matter is that I stink at that. I'm really bad at that. I really am. I'm terrible at it. And I could probably learn how to do it and get up to average, but otherwise, it's not what I'm good at. And I think one of the lessons in our lives, again, for individuals, and we'll come back to the lessons for leaders, is that you think about there's a large universe of things to be good at. And each of us is good at only a tiny portion of those things. And so you're much better off doing those things and figuring out another way to get those other things done. So I shouldn't be running anything. But there are other things that I am good at, and that's what I should, those small group of things is what I should focus on. Now, if I had to but if for some reason I was pushed into that position, the way that I would build a culture would be a few things. One would be from Bob Sutton at Stanford University. He has what he calls the no asshole rule. I think I would start with that we don't allow people to be jerks. Not allowed. You're a jerk, you're gone. We're not even going to let you in the freaking door. All right. So you have a no asshole rule. Another thing that I would do is foster a great degree of psychological safety, so people have room to take to try stuff and do small experiments. And I find too many organizations where they say, "Oh, we love failure. We want people to try stuff," and then when someone tries stuff and it doesn't work, they get their head handed to them. I think what I would try to do in my culture is, if people tried an experiment, a small experiment, and it failed, I would make sure that everybody in the organization gave them a round of applause, and we celebrate the trying of the experiment rather than the outcome. So that's one. And that's a lot about psychological. That's a lot of psychological safety. I would come up with okay. So can I rant again about something else? So I see all these companies that have like mission, vision, and values. Mission, vision, and values. I still don't understand what the difference is among those three things. I would say, can we have a simple beacon that defines who we are and what we're here for? And it should be probably 4 or 5 words, and I'm going to listen to the employees to figure out what that is. It could be like, we make the coolest sunglasses in the world. Like that is so much better than anything that most of these consultants come up with on behalf, who do these 6-month-long projects to figure out your mission, vision, and values. So I would center it around simple beacons. I would have a great degree of autonomy, and I would also make sure that we had in place very sort of managers in a role as very much as coaches, not as people who are watching what you're doing, not as hall monitors, but as your tennis coach or your swimming coach who's always there, being both supportive and having high standards to help you get better.
Ooh, I love that. So no assholes, psychological safety, have a simple beacon for people to focus on, autonomy, and then coaches, not enforcers.
Yeah. Coaches, not hall monitors. Yeah.
Not hall monitors. Got it.
I know. Are there still hall monitors in schools?
I don't know. I got to assume not, but I don't know. I don't know anything.
There might. Who knows? Maybe I'm just showing my age here. It's like, no, Dan, there are metal detectors now in schools. We got rid of hall monitors a long time ago.
I mean, I also have been on school for a while, so I don't know. All right, Dan, thanks for your time. One last question. What's one status quo you think that we need to challenge inside company cultures?
I think that the status quo, especially not so much of companies like yours, but of big companies, where the pay for the people at the top is so out of proportion, like hundreds of times the pay for people who are doing the work on the front lines. The idea that is the notion that somehow is wise or smart or justified seems to me nutty. The other thing that I would the other status quo that I would challenge is that the idea, the notion that only some people in the organization have good ideas. I think that every single person in every organization is sitting on a great idea, and what you want to do is you want to liberate those and celebrate those.
Yeah, find ways to tease them out.
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, you look at some of these things. You look at some of the. There was a guy who was he spent 4 months as the VP of communications at Disney, and he made something like $8 million before he got bounced. All right, you can work as a You can work at a Disney hotel for your entire life and not make $8 million. And this schmo did it in 4 months. I don't know, how a company like Disney can say this is okay. Like, this is a really good thing for us.
For sure. But completely agree. I can't thank you enough for not only your time today, but your work. We've used it quite a bit in our culture and myself personally. So this has been great. I appreciate everything.
What a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for the great and probing questions, especially the existential one about can we be happy with our life and have regrets? That's a huge question that people should be asking themselves. And the answer is that they are compatible. And once you see their compatibility, you actually end up revealing, I think, a path to an even better life.
Oh, man. I completely agree. Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Thank you, listeners.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Gooder podcast. To submit questions for the podcast, learn more about our culture, and learn how you can status the quote challenge, head over to goodr.com/culture. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening, including on YouTube, where you can now watch all of our new episodes. Who knows? You might even catch a glimpse of Carl at our headquarters if he's not already passed out at the tiki bar from all the margaritas.